This is the future of blockchain in retail and CPG supply chains. Our facilitator is Matthew Leotine. He is a PhD, professor, and management consultant on improving operations and supply chains using blockchain and other innovation. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks, Gene.
So let's talk about the theme that you guys pursued today, hypothetical case study.
We've been conducting this panel for some time, and so what we decided to do is put together a theme that would kind of converge a lot of the ideas that we've discussed to date. And so what we decided to do is put together a theme that looked at a hypothetical case study where a retailer would basically look at a product, say in a retail environment, and scan the product, and based on their requirements, using a blockchain core, would they be able to identify certain things about the product, or at least sense certain things about the product, like, for example, whether it was sourced responsibly or ethically, did it undergo any type of production exceptions, is it a lemon, has it been tampered with, has it been expired, does it have ingredients that they would like to see, so these kinds of things. And so even though we call it a hypothetical case study, in fact, there are use case trials going on as we speak, which are actually trying to at least implement part of this idea in a blockchain environment.
Sounds great. So tell us about some of the panelists that sat on this knowledge stream.
Yeah, we've had a group of panelists for some time now, and I have to say they've been very, very loyal to this panel. And here you see some of the people, who they are. They represent all walks of life, but they're very, very credible people, from COOs to CEOs. We have enterprise technology people, we have some business people, and I think that for this type of case study, it requires a cross-section of people with different skills and backgrounds to provide a balanced input to determine the feasibility and merits and caveats of what we're talking about here.
Now, I know we have 6 key points that we're going to be getting into today, but walk us through the executive summary.
Yeah, sure. Well, the executive summary basically has several things that we touched upon here, and I'll just cover this as kind of an agenda that we plan to talk about today. First of all, what kind of products is blockchain suited for? One of the outputs that we talked about was usually high-stake items and big-ticket items, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. How does blockchain leverage new technologies? We found that it really cannot work alone. It has to integrate and interoperate with existing and new technologies, and we'll cover what we mean by that. Also, we'll talk about the realization process in terms of getting a implementation, what's involved here. And one of the things we talked about that involves basically getting a committed collaboration across key stakeholders, developing a minimum viable product, and then scaling up. So we'll touch upon what's involved there. And then how do we assess and appraise the deployment or potential deployment? This is really an area which I think we felt was very, very important. And so we'll talk about some of the things that we discuss here in this line item here, go into it a little bit deeper.
Great. So let's get into a key point number 1. What are the prime areas of application for blockchain?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, what we found was that items that are high-stake items, usually when the stakes are high, that's where blockchain really could play a role. And these items usually involve getting some kind of assertion of the proof of provenance of that item because of the risk that's involved. For example, if you're looking at luxury items that are expensive, like diamonds or paintings or fine wine, these kinds of things, big ticket items are usually those items that fall into that category. But of course, there are other items as well, typically where public health is at stake. So any kind of consumable or any kind of pharmaceutical where if the proof of provenance is not verified or unclear, or if it's violated, then that could basically affect the health safety of the public or consumer.
So I guess in the one part we have these security issues, safety issues, which we should all be worried about, right? And then the other one, I want to go back to the value element for just a second. Do you think that there's a tipping point in a price point for some of these luxury items?
Well, yeah. The question here is how much are people willing to pay for this kind of security, and not only how much are people willing to pay, but also how far do you go in terms of investment costs and building in this capability? Is there going to be any kind of reward back from doing this kind of thing? Would it make the product more desirable if you were to provide consumers with this kind of checking and this kind of affirmation?
And
So
do you
that's
have
one
a
of the,
ballpark figure on where you think that tipping point is? Or
no, not
when
yet.
yeah.
No,
And obviously, as blockchain continues to come down in price, that factor is going to change as well, right?
yeah, that's the hard part right now. That's what I
Yeah.
think what are these pilots that are going on right now are trying to get some feeling for is what would be the price point.
Okay. And some of that's affected by the technology. So why don't we get into that here in key point number 2?
Sure. Okay. Well, here we look at what kind of solutions in terms of technology would have to be available in order to make this happen. Blockchain is not a standalone item. It has to integrate with many, many other technologies, some of those that are existing and some of those that could be new. In fact, we're learning now that blockchain could also provide the basis for some new business models that we don't even know yet. We touched upon this discussion just now. So when you look at trying to launch a blockchain app, and as a precursor, we found that it's probably very convenient to have existing ERP systems, enterprise data warehouses, cloud technology. These things really serve as a backbone for your blockchain application because it's going to involve data and information.
So with data and information is going to
will
come
really
investment, obviously. So why don't we move into one of your areas of expertise as a consultant is how do you assess the ROI on this investment?
Right. So the ROI basically looks at what kind of return are we going to get for our investment. And so there were two avenues that we looked at here. One is going to be the fact that, yes, you're going to probably get some cost savings per the amount that you invest, operational costs, and that's usually usually a sure way of proving this in. But on the other hand, what kind of new things, what kind of new revenue can you achieve out of this? And this could be through premiums. Consumers would likely want to pay for that kind of affirmation of provenance, but also could providing this kind of feature draw some new demand for your product. You could maybe institute a reward program of some kind. So there's some new business models that could be built upon this that people are trying to explore. Another important point about this, though, is that the channel for or the way of achieving this success, this goes towards the trend that is taking place right now with democratization, and that is that consumers are really looking to have more information about what they're doing, about their products and services. And one thing we found that if using blockchain to support consumer-facing types of services in the CPG space would probably be very, very desirable. And that's why our case study is positioned in such a way that what we're offering here is a more consumer-facing type of role in the supply chain. So we're seeing that that could be an avenue for success in blockchain.
Okay, so I guess once we've done all the work and we've decided we want to, in fact, incorporate blockchain, what's the implementation process look like?
Well, it first starts off with deciding who the stakeholders are going to be in this process, who's going to take part in this collaboration, because in a blockchain you're working with networks, and networks have nodes, and who owns these nodes to be participating. So the digital ledger is the centerpiece for this kind of collaboration. That's first and foremost. And then secondly, the business application. What are going to be the business rules, the logic that's going to drive this application? These 2 points here are basically the precursors. You need to have these established first in order to move on and then integrate the application with a blockchain core. Blockchain is going to sit as a back-end mechanism. It's going to be an embedded technology. People will not even know it's there.
Right. So let's talk about how blockchain is actually going to be used in application. I guess some of this is case study and some of this is hypothetical, right?
Well, actually, based on the case studies that we've seen and from our panel, if you put 2 and 2 together, it always seems to be that people are looking for proof of provenance, particularly in the CPG market. They want to know the authenticity of their products, particularly if it's a high-ticket item, or they want to know if the product consumes to their own personal requirements. And so this idea of proof of provenance is something that we've seen now that could be one of the primary benefits using blockchain in the CPG space.
And then Steve is also continuing to talk about maybe being able to track defective products or alerts as well.
Yeah, well, one of the things we've also talked about was how much information about a product do you incorporate in a blockchain-driven digital ledger. And we found on studies that you really cannot track every transaction that has occurred regarding this product. So maybe it might be more appropriate to identify the exceptions. Where were these requirements regarding a product not satisfied, there would probably be less exceptions than there would be successful transactions. So what we decided to emphasize here was that people, maybe they don't need to know whether it satisfies all the requirements, but at least tell me which requirements were not satisfied.
Right.
That is definitely doable.
And so I guess that takes us to our final point, which is key point number 6, solution architecture.
Yeah, this point deals with how would the architecture look, what kind of architecture is envisioned for deploying a blockchain application, particularly for the case study that we're talking about. And we talked about basically 4 layers. One would be an application layer involving distributed applications. These applications would enforce business rules across all nodes in the blockchain. The application layer has to be looked at first, though, because that's going to be business process. That's going to emulate the business process.
Okay, Matt, you had a really great panel. Let's talk about the 3 that really stood out for you.
Yeah, these 3 individuals have shown in the past themes. They've always come out much on top. They really produce some really, really good inputs, good quality ideas. And again, these people are terrific. We always get some good stuff from them.
Great. Well, I look forward to our next theme. This has been really an interesting conversation. What can we expect in theme number 7, Matt?
Yeah, well, the next theme is going to be a little bit more interesting because up until now we've been hyping about all the benefits and possibilities with blockchain. Our next theme is going to focus a little bit more on the dark side. What things do we have to look out for? What are some of the caveats? So that should be quite interesting.
Great. Well, thanks again. Great job walking us through the slides. I look forward to our next conversation, Matthew.
Thanks a lot.
It's Matthew Leotine. He is a PhD, a professor, and a management consultant on improving operations and supply chain using blockchain and other innovation. Thanks again, Matt.
Thank you, Gene.